Hey guys, so after my experience with Solaris 2.4, I figured installing Solaris 2.5 on this 486DX33 would be a cakewalk. And nothing could have been farther from the truth. It was a challenge. But in the end, I succeeded. In case you haven't seen my first video on Solaris, you really should check that out. In this video, I'm going to skip over a lot of the installation procedure and basically dive right into the graphical portion. Of course, I started by booting from the DCA floppies, that's Disk Configuration Assistant, pointed it to the CD-ROM, and I encountered this. Now those are I/O errors reading the disk. Long story short, it was just a bad disk. So I found another copy of 2.5, actually a slightly newer version. And from there, the installation just went perfectly. Now, just like in 2.4, unfortunately, I'm stuck in a 640 by 480 resolution. I actually tried to reconfigure the GUI for 800 by 600, but it seems my Trident video card simply isn't up to the task. Each time I tried a new 800 by 600 mode, the monitor would fail to sync, and I'd be left with an unreadable desktop. Which, just as a side note, that's a very good point. If you're playing along at home, one of the first things you want to do is create a non-root user. If you do find yourself in this situation where you can't read the desktop, unless you can log in remotely and do a clean reboot, you're going to have to hit the reset button. And for a Unix system, of course, that's a very bad idea. That's how you turn your file system into Swiss cheese. So create that non-root user, make sure you can telnet into the computer, and then you've got a safety net. So far we've seen the OpenLook window manager, but later versions of Solaris included another window manager called CDE, the Common Desktop Environment. Now, CDE was an improvement over OpenLook, but really it's a bit of a resource hog. I'm not expecting good things on this 486, but let's take a look. Oh, by the way, I should point out, CDE was available for x86, SPARC, and PowerPC. Now, I believe that would have been the IBM platform AIX, not the PowerPC that you'd see in your Macintosh. Although some of them did use the same chips. So let's execute the install script. And of course, I'm going to speed through this. This installation actually takes a long time. I don't want that GUI to run automatically on boot. Honestly, I'm simply going to show you this graphical interface and ultimately turn it off, probably uninstall it. And there we go, those packages are installed. And before I reboot and show you the common desktop environment, let's take one last look through OpenLook. Now we've got a performance meter. Okay, that's pretty basic. Not as exciting as I'd expected. Let's see what else we've got in here. Well, we've got the option to customize the color scheme. If I had to use this on a regular basis, I would probably get rid of that blue. And then, of course, we have our workstation information. Yeah, we're using just about all of that 16 megs of memory, and even dipping into the swap. So let's reboot and bring up CDE. Now, if you used pretty much any Unix variant in the mid-1990s, this interface will look familiar. I know it brings back memories for me. Now, ultimately, CDE was released as open source. As a matter of fact, in most Linux and BSD distributions, there's either a binary or a source package for CDE. So if you wanted to try it at home, if you're running any sort of Unix variant, you've probably got that option. And as you can see, CDE is a little more polished than the OpenLook. It looks a little bit more like a modern desktop. Although it still includes that tutorial on how to use your mouse. I always got a charge out of that. Well, and some of those links, unfortunately, don't seem to go anywhere. Now, of course, we do have our terminal. Now, that was one of the first things I had to do when I installed 2.5. It actually doesn't come with the bash shell. And if you're familiar with Unix shells, having things like command line history and tab autocomplete, I don't know about you guys, personally, I couldn't live without those two features. Now we've got an image viewer. Now I really should start loading in a couple of images, just so I can demo these image viewers. But either way, you get the idea. And of course, we have an email client. Now I looked through all the options in this program. I can't find anywhere you'd add a POP3 or an SMTP server, so I suspect it's just for local mail on the system and not actually for inter-system email. Now, getting Netscape onto this computer was a bit of a challenge. I mentioned in my Solaris 2.4 video that a lot of software was indeed ported to this platform, but a lot of it was distributed as gzipped tarballs. And of course, to uncompress those, you need a copy of gzip, which is also not included on the computer. So I had to track down a copy of gzip that was itself not compressed, get that installed, and then get Netscape installed. But eventually I was able to access my local web server. Now, try as I might, I was not able to get Netscape Mail configured. After several frustrating attempts, I went back to a terminal-based email client. Now, I used Pine from the mid-1990s right up until around 2010. So I'm logged in here as the user Annika. I've configured Pine to point to my Jasmine email server, and Annika is going to send an email to Scott. So behind the scenes, I'm logged into Jasmine, and I'm just going to reply to Annika's email. And Annika backs out of Pine, goes back in, drops in her password, and lo and behold, she's got an email, and they've got plans. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, I had some real problems in getting this operating system installed. I had multiple copies of the CD from different sources, but they all seemed to fail with I/O errors reading the disk. Now, I thought at first it was an issue between the fast CD burner, the fast compact flash card, and the slow IDE controller, but that really didn't make a whole lot of sense because the same configuration worked perfectly with an older version of Solaris. And I know this CD burner is good. I've used it to install multiple different operating systems. So, as a workaround, I started building a Solaris network install server. I may actually use that at some point to install Solaris 2.6. 2.6 is way more polished than the previous versions, but it's also very resource intensive. It's not going to run on this old 486. That means I may need to buy one of those newfangled Pentium systems. So that was just a quick overview of Solaris 2.5. As I mentioned earlier, I'm probably going to remove the GUI entirely, turn off quite a lot of services on this computer, and use it as another headless system. In fact, one of the next things I want to do is take a look at an old version of FreeBSD. I have FreeBSD 2.2, and I recently downloaded a copy of 4.0. Both of those operating systems can be installed over the network using FTP. So it could be fun to do a network install from this old Solaris box to a 386 or maybe a 486. So if you enjoyed this one, feel free to like and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and as always, thanks for watching.